Hi, and welcome to Gen Friends. Tonight, we are going to talk about the Jon Cryer episode of Who Do You Think You Are? And we are going to talk to our special guest tonight, someone who's been on our panel before, and we're glad that she's back. We're going to talk to Christine Woodcock, who's just come back from Scotland, and she runs the, say it for me,
Genealogy Tours of Scotland.
Genealogy Tours of Scotland. I almost said Tours of Genealogy Scotland, and I know that's wrong. I know that's wrong. So, sorry about that. And also on our panel, we have Cheri O'Connell, who is the executive director of the In-Depth Genealogist. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. We have Melissa Barker, our archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, everybody.
And last but not least, we have Mary Kircher-Roddy from MKR Genealogy.
Hi, everybody.
So, what are your impressions of the Jon Cryer episode where he was able to find an ancestor and want to know where he came from and ended up in Scotland? What is your first take of his story? Anybody? Well, he started out by finding out that his ancestor had been brought over from Scotland. And I don't even know if I really had known about this before, but he actually was bought by the Ironworks company.
Yeah, so if I can just, so it was part of the Dunbar Soldiers, which took place in 1650, September 1650. And the whole premise behind that was that there's all this chaos between Scotland and England, right?
Right.
So now there's the king in England has had enough of the Scots, not obeying the rules, not towing the line, all that kind of stuff.
Scots.
And so starts to put some rules in place. And one of the things that he wanted to switch was the way that the church functioned. So he wanted it to be more like the Church of England, which is Anglican, where the current reigning monarch is the head of the church, always. Right. And in Scotland, the Presbyterians are like, sorry, yep, not doing that. First of all, it was sort of you're not going to impose. And the other thing is that they really believed that Jesus was the head of their church. Thank you anyway. And so a huge number of really intellectual people, and so clergy, lawyers, doctors, all gathered in Edinburgh, and they signed what is known as the National Covenant. And this document was sent all over Scotland, and it had thousands of signatures on it saying, we're going to stay with God as the head of our church. We're not going to go the way the England is. So, of course, England doesn't like that, because here they are, the Scots again, doing their own thing. So now they are starting to round these people up. So a lot of them go into hiding, and they start to have their church services, in outside of a church, sort of in a field by a rock or whatever. And so then some of the Presbyterians decided, okay, the only way we're going to get the king to understand that is if we go and sort of go to war with him. So it was known as the Third Civil War, Third English Civil War or something. And that didn't work, because they had this huge battle. They entered England, and there was this huge battle in Dunbar, which is on the east coast, just above the English border.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 6,000 Scottish men were rounded up. And they were forced marched down to Durham, which is about 35 miles. And the reason they were forced marched down to Durham is because they had to get them out of Scotland so that their family and friends couldn't
rescue them, I'm sure. Yeah.
Help them escape. Yeah. So they're forced marched down there. On the way, 3,000 die.
That was incredible. When they were talking about the numbers of people that died, that's just incredible.
So there was 3,000 of them died, and they died of exposure. They died of starvation. They died from their wounds, whatever, right? So half of the amount get there that started out. So 6,000 are rounded up, 3,000 arrive. Of those, 1,500 die in Durham Cathedral, in the prison that's built at Durham Cathedral. The other,
is there a separate prison then built there? Because they sound like everybody was in the cathedral. Right. So that was the prison inside the cathedral.
It was probably, I don't think it was actually in the cathedral. It was probably in the churchyard. I know that they had two other places where they rounded up the prisoners. One was in Greyfriars Cemetery, Greyfriars Kirkyard, interestingly enough, because that's where they signed the National Covenant, and it's open to the elements. There were 1,200 people in there.
Oh,
So there's no
wow.
roof. It's really just an area of the churchyard that's fenced off.
So when
And so they were out there.
when they told Jon Cryer that his ancestor would have walked through the same doors, maybe not.
Maybe.
Oh man, Cheri, because that was your favorite part of the episode.
Well, you know what it could have been. Some of them may have been in the basement of the prison, but you wouldn't have got 1,500 people in a prison. There's no way, right? Not inside a church.
That's
so
fair.
Some of them would have been outside. And the other one that was used as a prison, there's this huge basalt rock, like enormous basalt rock off the coast of Dunbar. And so prisoners were put out there as well. And there was a prison there, but again, it wouldn't have held a whole lot of people. Anyway, so 3,000 arrive, 1,500 die there, and the others are sent over. They're transported over to the colonies. They get a sentence of transportation.
So all of them went. Okay.
Yeah, but some of the enterprising ship owners decided, hey, I'm going to make a buck on this. So they bought the men. They paid like money for them to transport, and they were going to charge 30 pounds a head for the people at the other end. Well, by the time they got there, some of the people were so sick or had died on board that they weren't even worth 5 pounds. They couldn't get the money that he had wanted to get from them. But 140 of them, I think, were sold to the Saugus Iron Works in, is it Massachusetts? Just outside of Boston, in Lynn.
And that's
where that ancestor ended up. Yes. But a different part of that whole story is that of the 1,500 who had died on site in October or November of 2013, the church went to do an expansion of their cafe and uncovered the remains of those soldiers in a mass grave.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've actually been following it from that angle since then. I knew about it anyway, but so I went to a series of talks about that when I was in Scotland about 2 years ago, met one of the archaeologists who was on the case. What they're trying to do through DNA, they have a really large database of descendants in the US, but they're trying to match them up with people who are still in Scotland so that they can find their ancestors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if, he had the one ancestor that went. I wonder if any of his people, he may have had, that ancestor may have had brothers. He may have had uncles and dad or anybody, so
yeah.
There's a potential then that he may have somebody buried there in their DNA.
He probably has living relatives who are descendants, right? Still in Scotland that he wouldn't know about.
Probably.
And then for the whole indentured part, after, so actually I did look up on John Adams, and John Adams was an oxen manager. So he actually got paid for his work at Saugus Iron Works, even though he was indentured. And quite often what happened is that depending on sort of the job they did, they got paid anyway. But at the end of their indenture, they were free and clear to go, right? And a lot of them wound up having, really good lives because they wouldn't have had them.
I didn't realize that they could get paid, and so that would make sense how he could have a life afterwards and do well. And then he was part of the group that started that benevolent society for the other Scottish people in the area. His name was on that, and they helped him. And I thought, was he helping him financially? But maybe he was. If he was able if he was able to earn some money, to put away, that makes a lot of sense as to how. I'm glad you know all this. Point, fill in the blanks.
I know Jon Cryer said something about, I just can't imagine how horrible how scared he would be to be embarking on this. And I thought, you know what, compared to the prison life, it would have been paradise to be on that boat and then out in the fresh air and not have to, even though it was still indentured servitude, he got meals and he had a place to live and, he was getting some pay. It wouldn't have been anything like prison at all.
And his opportunities are going to be far greater in North America than he ever would have had in Scotland.
Absolutely.
He was able to own his own land. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Cheri, tell us about why that was your favorite part, where where they told him that his ancestor had walked through the door.
So I thought
she started to cry.
The whole episode, I thought he was just slightly interested. It was like he showed a little intrigue, like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? And when he was in Scotland in the church and he was told that it was most likely his ancestors walked through that door, you could see that it all clicked together. I mean, stopped. And I mean, in the video, the camera just panned him as he slowly turned his head and looked at the doors and really thought about, I truly just walked like the steps my ancestors have. I mean, we've all had that when we go out. I know Christine does when she goes out. I've done it. I'm sure you all have done it. At some certain point, you just stop and you look and you breathe and you take it in and you think, oh my God, like this is the view they saw, or it was something like this.
Something like this. Yeah. And when he was at the actual battle site too, I mean, to be at a place where history was made, where your ancestor was captured, where, you know, he was there fighting.
Blood was shed.
Where blood was shed. Absolutely. I mean, that's got to touch your heart, even if you don't show it on camera. I can't imagine being somewhere like that and have it not, you know, affect you in some way. And then the closing scenes where the credits were going, he was walking through the area around the cathedral and all that. And so I'm hoping that he knew the story before they filmed that, you know, that he was really pondering the fact that his ancestor had been there, and who knows on what part of the property and where he'd walked around and what he'd done, but he'd at least seen that, you know, his eyes had at least seen that. Yeah.
I just think that 2-second clip made the whole show, because otherwise I thought it was kind of a mediocre start for the season. I was like, it's a good story. It's great to hear. It's good history. Something I knew really nothing about. So when they just showed that pan of him, like, it just, you could just see that it all clicked together for him.
Do you know what though, Cheri? It's not even seeing it with your eyes. You just get this whole thing where you feel it.
Yes.
Right? You can't even describe it because it's in your bones.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But to see that you know he got it was like, it was just, it made that episode.
It impacted. Yeah.
And I agree with that, being in your bones, because I've got some counties that I can be driving through in South Carolina and I just feel it. And it's like I'm going, hi everybody, I'm driving through, or I'm back. I'm back. Exactly. I can just feel it. And so, you know, so I really agree with that.
I always think there should be like a pipe band parade for me when I'm in those areas. He's back.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to say anything about the actual episode before we kind of turn it over to talk a little bit about your tours and the things that you do over there? Speaking about feeling and taking people over there.
One of my thoughts, you guys know who his wife is, don't you? Lisa Joyner.
I did not know.
Yeah, so that may be why he was a little blasé about. I suspect they've probably done some genealogy beforehand. So the stuff some of the early stuff that they found, not the going to Scotland part, but some of the earlier stuff, he had to have known some of that.
Even the Scotland stuff he may have known about, but actually standing there is different, right?
Right.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I had no clue. That's
Look at you, Mary.
in my mind.
Mary's our resident let's get everything behind the scenes person for all the shows.
I did 2,000 hours worth of research. I'm going to be and find the same stuff.
That's right. Mary shall find what they didn't. Absolutely. So funny.
All right. Anyway, a little Hollywood tip for the day.
Wow. Well, thanks for that. So tell us about what you do. Tell us about taking people over and showing them their roots and those tours of Scotland.
Do you know, it is absolutely the most humbling experience. It's exciting for me because I get to, I know what the records are going to show. And then I go in and I sit in the archives or the libraries, and I see people with all these books around them, and they're glued to them because their ancestors' names are in there and there's stories in there. But then for me to hear the emotion in their voices when they tell me is like, well, and they, I had a lady who, I had a man who, I don't know how many, but probably 4 or 5 of them out of this time actually were at the house where their ancestor lived or where their ancestor worked, if they were farmers or gardeners. And all of them were invited, because the thing in Scotland is really, if you're there, and I'm telling anybody who goes and you get to the house where your ancestor was, knock on the door. Knock on the door. I'm telling you, you'll be invited in. You'll probably get tea. And everybody kept saying, Oh, no, I was too timid. And I'm like, oh man, you should have knocked on the door. Then I'm going, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a genealogist in Scotland. And he does a lot of this, like he gets contacted for these shows. And I forget what it was he was telling me, and he had broken a brick wall. And I'm like, no, great, now you just need to find Easter Seat Farm. He said, what's that? I said, well, way back on my dad's line, John Haddo was the overseer, the accounts overseer for this farm. And I said, I've seen it in the documents. I've never found it on a map, hasn't been in a gazetteer, hasn't been anywhere. 3 minutes later, I get this ping on my phone, and it's a link to the farm. I'm like, get out.
Fabulous.
I'm like, it's still there? He's like, it's still there. And it had the man's name and everything. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go it's between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and I was driving, and I thought, okay, this is the day I'm going to go find Easter Seat. And on the way, I saw the sign for where my dad's mom grew up. So I'm going to go see if I can find the house. And it was funny because I drove down the street. I didn't even look at the street name. I didn't even look at the number on the house, and I just knew. And I kept driving past this house.
That makes me want to cry.
And I thought, I know, and I'm like, okay, I got to get out. And I was standing there. I was just, you're in awe, right? And so I thought, okay, I've done my bit there. Now I'm going to go. So I get in the car and I go back and I find this Easter Seat Farm, and it is, and I just did the same. Like Terry said, you just you're glued. So now I know why they don't knock on the door.
I was just going to say, you didn't knock on the door.
No.
You didn't take your own advice. Oh my gosh.
I'm like, wow. But and it's just, I at dinners, at breakfast, and you just hear this time after time after time, and they've got the new piece of the story, and there'd be ancestors that they're angry with, they just don't understand, and then they get the story, and their hearts are broken for them, right? It's like, oh man, if I had known that, I wouldn't have been so harsh on him. It's an incredible feeling, and it's I had 24 participants in 2 different tours, and probably 23 of those had an experience like that. It was incredible. One lady, I had hooked her up with somebody who took her to the they'll take you to the houses and the streets and all that kind of stuff. So she had gone with 2 different people to 2 different parts of Scotland. And the first one, she just stood and cried. She honestly, she stood and cried while she was telling me the story. And her husband had come on the trip with her. He's not a genealogist. And I said to him, she's like, oh my God, I touched it, and my ancestor, and and he goes, really? It's a bunch of rocks in a field.
Oh no! Send him home. Oh my gosh.
But his cousin had come along just for the sake of being in Scotland. So every night when we got back from the archives, Chris would go and she'd show them what she had learned. So the cousin, on the very last day they're in Glasgow, the cousin hires this taxi driver out front of the hotel to take her to all those places that were on the documents.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So as it turns out, he grew up in that area. So he drives her around for 2.5 hours, takes her out for coffee, gives her the whole social history. He says, my family was poor, but yours were dirt poor.
Oh gosh. That just wasn't a coincidence. I love hearing stories like that.
And charged her less than $20 to do it.
Oh gosh.
And only because she insisted on paying.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, when do you go back?
I don't go back now until after the cruise. Terry and I are going on a cruise.
Well, talk about the cruise.
Yeah, talk about the cruise. Let's hear about the cruise. Come on. One of these days, I want to go on a cruise.
Well, I've never realized, we should all go. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Yeah. We could do a Gen Friends.
Yeah.
Gen Friends cruise.
Gen Friends cruise. I don't know. That might be too scary for anybody involved.
You hear about these genealogy cruises, and I've never understood it, because to me it's just like a floating conference, right? Which I guess is the point. I don't know. Yeah. But and I always thought, if you're going to do something like that, and it's probably the ancestral tourism piece of me, I thought, if you're going to do that, you should build in research opportunities. So Terry found a cruise that leaves Dublin. So it does Dublin, Belfast, Glasgow, Inverness, and Edinburgh. And every one of those, we've got it built so that people can get off the boat, go to the archives, and do research there.
Awesome. That is fabulous.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But to top it off, it also goes to Cove.
Yes.
And it goes to France.
Oh.
It goes into England. So you get to see
And it goes
so
to the
much more.
it goes to the Guernsey Islands.
Wow.
Yes.
That's quite the cruise.
Yeah.
How many nights?
12, Terry?
What's that?
How
Is
many
it 12
nights?
nights?
13.
Wow, that's a cruise.
Yeah.
That's
But
a
you know what?
trip.
Yeah. But the night before, Terry found this place. It's the oldest pub in
Ireland.
Dublin. Yep. Oh, is it Ireland? And it's they do storytelling and folklore with a dinner.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to do that as well. How cool is that? Are you in, Cheri?
I wish I was.
my
You could.
dog's
I wish I was. You can find a job for me to do so I can afford to go. I would be there in a heartbeat.
I think it's
Yeah.
going to be an amazing time.
Wow.
Not just because we're getting into all these cool ports and Christina has set up all these cool research opportunities for people, but we're also going to go see where the Titanic was built. We're going to go
the Salmon Museum or the Immigrant Museum.
Yeah, the Immigrant Museum. We're going to go and do like not the Outlander. What's the tour you set up in Scotland?
Yeah, in Inverness, where the battle took place. Culloden.
Wow. Yeah.
And the
Wow.
Clavicairns.
So much good stuff.
Oh, this better. And this is for next year?
Yeah,
May
2019. So it's the 4th to the 16th of May.
Oh, I
And
hope
then
it goes really, really well so that you'll do it again.
You know, we have booked quite a few people already. Like I was really shocked at how well it started booking right away.
I think we have about maybe 25, 30 people?
Roughly.
Because we've got about 16 cabins, 2 people in a cabin.
Well, I just thought of a job for me. You're going to all these pubs, right? You're going to need a designated person to get you back to the boat, right? And since I don't drink, I could be that.
Sherry's going to hold the rope so we can all find our way back. Then you'll know what my job's like. Some days I feel like I'm herding cats. That's exactly how you feel by the end of it, Cheri.
I'm sure. I can't wait to see how this all turns out. This sounds
it's going to be amazing. We have some plans for something different as well later on. So
yeah, oh good.
Yeah, one of the archivists. She was an archivist for the National Records, and she digitized quite a few of their records, so they're available on virtual volumes on site. And I connected with her last year. She gave a talk, so I connected with her, and she did a webinar for me for part of the Scottish virtual conference that I do. And so I met up with her in Edinburgh, and she says, "Okay, now about this cruise." And of course, everybody wants to go, right?
Yes.
But what she offered to do, which I think is a fantastic idea, is to do. So we have 2 days where we're at sea, not together, but 2 days where we're at sea. She's offered to do one-on-one workshops. So she'll set it up like a class and then give you, like, it's small enough that she do one-to-one on reading old handwriting.
Oh my
Wonderful.
goodness. This is sounding better.
The only other person I know that could do that is Melissa.
Yep.
Genealogists don't do as well at that as archivists do because they deal with it all the time, right?
You need to start putting in your requests for time off.
I know.
Yeah.
But and then on top of that, we do have a couple people joining us to do some things. Some of them we're still working out, but it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say it's gonna be fun?
Oh, it's good. And it is different. It is different because you're stopping to research too. So you get the research, you've got the classes. It's an all in one package. Yeah. Fabulous. I love it. I'm jealous.
Stop.
He's happy too.
So the puppy wants to go too. Fabulous. Thank you all so much for coming on and talking to us. Christine, we all want to go on the cruise. Thank you for coming in. And we all want to go to Scotland with you, whether we have Scottish ancestors or not. We want to go experience that with you. What a wonderful thing to do is to be able to go to the places where your ancestors lived. You know, I think for everybody that should be on their bucket list is to be able to go walk the places where they walked. You know, start off with those places in the United States and then, you know, get wherever they were before that if you can, you know, find out and get as close as you possibly can to wherever they were and walk in those places. It's fabulous, and everybody should have that experience. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us on this episode of Gen Friends, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.